Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TheMsTexasShow. This is the show where we highlight amazing survivors from human trafficking, sexual assault, domestic abuse, as well as wartime trauma survivors. We also invite our community leaders to come on the show and share their resources. We have a segment called Military Time, and we partner with the National Veterans Chamber of Commerce. We invite military as well as veterans to share their experience during and after their services. And next we have a show Beauty for Ashes. And this is a segment where we invite our pageant and artists such as actors, musicians, dancers, last but not least, ambassadors who are survivors from those crimes and now are sharing their platform and bringing awareness and doing great things in the community. If you would like to be a guest of this show, you may email us at msusatexas@gmail.com. It's missusatexas.com. At gmail.com. You can also contact us direct message through Facebook with the same name, MSUSA Texas. Today we are having this special show and our special guest is Mr. Patrick Erlandson. And welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here.
I know you do so much, and I am reading your bio right now, and I guess maybe sometime in the past we have crossed our paths because you've actually lived in Texas for 8 years. Actually, you were the director for Horizon Galleries in Houston, Texas. So
That's right.
that is awesome. The world is small, isn't it?
It sure is. Yeah, now my two daughters live in Texas as well. So
Lovely. Yes,
let's
would
see what
love
happens.
to catch up, after this COVID thing. Hopefully we can all meet in person.
Yeah, that would be so great. Yeah, I'll be
Perfect.
definitely making trips to Texas. So that's in the stars.
I know. Like you said that in your bio, you're the founder and director of Fathercon. You're the founder and director and outreach director for See It Ended and the See It Ended Film and Arts Festival. I'm sure that, there will be a lot of opportunities with that. And, a little bit about Patrick, he has like a long list. So I'm gonna start just telling a little bit based on what I'm reading, how he got involved. So he was, as I mentioned, director of Horizon Galleries in Houston, Texas, before moving to Japan for 8 years, where he discovered the love of teaching English, and then returning to California in 2000. So in 2010, while working with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee in LA, UNHCR, Patrick first learned of human trafficking organs from field agents working in Africa. And in 2012, he began leading prevention subcommittee of the Long Beach Human Trafficking Task Force. And the list goes on and on. Like I said, he is now the human trafficking advisor for the United Nations Women's Association in LA. And he also has his own show, See It Ended, on Twitch TV. And the rest, I'm going to let Patrick tell his own story. So, it's interesting that it's every day I'm learning from you guys, learning from activists and who is, working on the front line about this. I've always heard about organ trafficking and things, but you're the first person I'm kind of hearing directly. So tell us a little bit of like how all those work that you're doing, the great work you're doing, how did it get started?
Yeah, it was a whole transition, kind of like from one thing to the next, and then just having one door open, one window open, like and seeing things more clearly, what was happening around the world. And I think when I was running the art gallery in Texas, we supported like medical teams going into Afghanistan. There were different causes that we kind of gravitated to try to support, and using the platform of our business. But then when I started working with the UN, with the refugee agency, their office here in LA, the thing that just really captured my heart was it was people fleeing from South Sudan. And, you know, you knew about the Darfur region in southern Sudan, where you had, you know, the Janjaweed coming in and just slaughtering villages, communities, taking away children and then selling them in, you know, in slave markets in the capital city. And there was just so much violence in South Sudan. So some cases the parents were killed, some cases the parents sent their children away, and then some adults went with them. But you'd have many unaccompanied children crossing from South Sudan trying to get to Israel. So they would pass through Egypt on their way to find jobs and safety in Israel. And so the stories that we were getting from the UNHCR field agents was that these groups of children and groups of refugees would be coming into Egypt, and there was a group of Bedouins that would invite them in, take them into their community, feed them, you know, like give them, you know, bring them into their community, take care of them, welcome them, and promise to take them on to Egypt or take them on to Israel. And in the meantime, they'd send for a doctor from Cairo. The doctor would come down, they would all be drugged, and then the doctors would cut out all their organs and they would bury them in graves in the desert. And so at that time, the UN found, I believe it was about 100, 200 graves in the desert of a lot of children and refugees that had been fleeing. To me, it was, for some reason, that was just like a Mack truck slamming into my heart. And it was that absolute betrayal of a vulnerable person, where you're at the mercy of people's kindness, of their sincerity, and then to have them drug you and cut out your organs and then bury you in the desert. To me, it was just too much. And then I started researching everything I could find on human trafficking, and just discovering how prevalent it was in America, that it was not just an over there problem. It wasn't just in Cambodia and India and other places, but this was happening so, you know, on such a broad scale here in the United States. And then waking up to not just organ trafficking, but, you know, I mean, you have organ trafficking even going on today with the refugees. The refugee population is one of the most easily preyed upon. They're in an incredibly vulnerable position. You're at the mercy of people providing you with food, water, tents, you know, housing. So you have traffickers now just kind of preying on that population because it's just easy pickings. So there's organ trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, all going on and preying on refugee populations. So that's what kind of got my start.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned Sudanese. Actually, have a very good friend who lives here in Houston, Texas, and him and his wife. I know he's from Sudan.
Is that right?
And a little bit that, you know, we became very good friends because, like you said, they're very innocent. They have a kind heart, and just like such good soul. And so I had conversations with them. I felt really sad when I learned that the wife didn't really know. I was like, "How old are you?" She's like, "I'm not sure." Because when, you know, I got my identification, I didn't have my parents. I don't know what really happened. And that was just like an age that they guessed or estimated my age was. But it's just really a shame, like you said, you know, people are at their mercy, trying to get food. They can literally, like, you know, nowadays they can drug you anything from the ventilation system, from what I watch on TV, water, anything, as long as you're at their mercy. So I, you know, really applaud you for what you're doing right now for helping all those people. And so tell us about, you know, I know that you found your passion about teaching English. So how did you, you know, start doing like the See It Ended organization and the Fathercon? What are those about?
Okay, so that was again kind of a evolving effort. So I started working with the Long Beach Human Trafficking Task Force, which I dearly love. It's a really true collaborative of law enforcement, organizations, NGOs, you know, therapists, and just regular people who just want to do something. So when I joined, it was a fairly small group of people that was gathering. Now it's about 100. There's 160 people, I think, that are now connected with the task force in Long Beach. with kind of a monthly meeting.
Wonderful.
But I took over the prevention subcommittee. So when I was really looking at the area that I really wanted to fit in, it was, and there's restoration, there's the transitioning out of the life and out of being trafficked, and there's so many different areas, law enforcement, prosecution. What really appealed to me was prevention. So I started just kind of throwing myself into looking, upstream. So what is it that's causing a 12-year-old girl to make a friend on Instagram and then be willing to go off to meet him and trust this person she's just met on Instagram more than she trusts her own parents, more than she trusts any other adult in her world? Why do we have boys coming out of our homes that think it's okay to pay for sex with a 13-year-old autistic child? It's just, those things just kind of really were gripping me. And it's like, I was just looking at case after case of kids who, they were good kids on some, on a track to doing something really successful and great with their lives, and just got derailed by human traffickers. And so I started looking like, how can I go upstream? How can we start to remove the vulnerability? How do we start to protect kids from being trafficked at that vulnerable point in their lives? And also, how do we deal with the demand side? How do we look at how boys are being raised, how men behave, that's allowing this swelling of demand that's causing the need for more and more product? You have to supply that demand. And so that led me to a lot of different things. So the first events that I started to work on, we had the Youth Exploitation Safety Symposium that I put together. I had the idea with one of the therapists from Crittenden Services who was taking care of survivors of trafficking. And we decided we really wanted to have a much bigger impact and do something on a grander scale. And Long Beach was the perfect city. Long Beach city government was behind us. Law enforcement was behind us. The school superintendent was behind ending human trafficking. Everything was set in place. So we started to organize this Youth Exploitation Safety Symposium. It was really targeting not just the children, not just like students, but their parents and the community. We wanted to educate nurses and doctors and law enforcement. We wanted everyone to become aware of this issue. So we had two of those events, and then it morphed into something different. It basically turned into more of an empowerment program for kids, which was disappointing. But then I went on to really looking more and more with the research that I was doing, more and more what I was looking at was we really needed to concentrate on men. You go to task force meetings, it's 90% women. Anything to do with human trafficking was just predominantly female driven. And yet the demand side is male. And if we don't bring men into this issue, we're not going to end it. It's just not going to happen. So I started working as a director for Men Standing Against Trafficking. We started, God, it was like five or 6 years ago. We started going out to street corners where trafficking was happening, and we would get men to demonstrate. First, it was quarterly, and then when I took over the Long Beach Men Standing Against Trafficking, and I wanted to do it more frequently. So we started doing it every month. I'm sorry, every week.
I saw the picture. It was wonderful what you guys are doing. I saw the banners.
It was so moving because just some of the stories. So we were out, the third Friday of every month, we'd be out in this area. We moved a couple of times, but the last few years we've been in one area where there's four hotels that are all being used for traffickers. And inside one of them, one woman, Lynette Washington, was killed by her trafficker in one of the hotel rooms. He got mad at her at some point and killed her. And so we chose, to take over this intersection. And depending on how many men show up, we would take over the four corners and have big signs, say Men Standing Against Trafficking or End Trafficking, Stop Sex Trafficking. We'd all have our signs, and sometimes children would join us. Sometimes churches, like a ministry, would come and join us. But the stories we had, there was one time somebody posted the picture of us, and I got this message through Facebook Messenger from a trafficking survivor in Canada. And her message was, she had no idea that men cared. And it really struck me that to someone who's in the life, every single man is a customer. They see all men as a customer. And so this is kind of a wake up for her that there were actually men out there who really cared about what was happening to people in the life. And I'll never forget the last one we did before COVID hit. We've kind of been suspended since then, but we were on the corner, and this, a lift, someone driving a lift car just pulls into the parking lot, slams on the brakes, gets out of the car, rushes up to us, young Black woman, and she says, thank you for being here. And I said, yeah, you're welcome. and she goes, 5 years ago, I was being sold on this corner. And then she said the way that her trafficking ended was the last customer she had picked her up, did his business, and then pulled out a knife and stabbed her 4 times. And she showed us the knife wounds in her body. And then he dumped her into the gutter of the street. And she was fortunate that she got rescued, taken to a hospital. And during that time is when her trafficker kind of gave up on her when she was in the hospital. But we had so many stories like that, just like, really moving experiences. Neighbors would come up and talk to us about what it's like. They'd saved up for years and years to buy a house. They bought a house, and now their children on their way to walking to school are being harassed by pimps and traffickers, the girls out on the street giving them a hard time. This one man came in tears and he said, my daughter, she's 13 years old, and on her way to school, men are coming up and offering her money for sex because they think that she's one of the victims on the street, and just how heartbreaking it was for him as a father. And just getting these different perspectives was so important, I think, for me. And then that led then to really looking at fathers and realizing that fathers are in a very unique position. And we really have to really bring that back to really demonstrate the significance of fatherhood. Because I think for an awful long time, there's been kind of a downgrading of the significance of the father. Everything is about, the mother taking care of the kids. Single mothers are great. We don't need a man. Men, just as long as you bring home the money. There was this whole, kind of, concept of fatherhood as being, of much less importance than the mother's role. And I think we did an awful lot of harm through that. And when you look at just the statistics, just the basic statistics of kids growing up without fathers, the 5 times more, tendency to be impoverished, drop out of school, use drugs, be imprisoned. All of the statistics show that there's a clear link to missing fathers, absent fathers, and abusive fathers that lead to these kind of disasters down the road. So I started having this father conference called Fathercon. We've had 2 so far, and now we're working on the 3rd, where we could really bring men together and look at, not just the dangers of failed fatherhood, not just the bad points, but really celebrating the significance of being fathers. It's one of the most glorious things that a man can do, is be a father, and to raise children who, really feel their own significance and their the specialness of each and every human being. And so much of that comes from the father. That said, this is not at all to diminish the role of the mother, which is absolutely vital. But they're both extremely important in raising children. And there are certain things that don't develop in a boy if he's not really being raised by a man. If a man is not present in his life, there's a certain part of him that doesn't develop. And so with Fathercon, our approach was really how do we inspire fathers, and how do we get fathers who are off track back on track? How do we appeal to young men who are not fathers yet to really look at the responsibility that they're going to carry? And also, how do we inspire more men to be mentors? We have so many kids, so many children in America growing up without a healthy father figure in their life. And that's got to be fixed if we're going to start to deal with a lot of these issues, including human trafficking. So that was what we really targeted. So we'd have workshops, speakers. Through all of this, working with, so when you start looking at the male side, it just kind of reopened up to me the significance of pornography. and how much of a role pornography plays in increasing the demand. And to me, I started looking at, internet pornography changed everything. The whole issue of sex trafficking was transformed, by the internet. I use the example, like in Las Vegas when we had the shooting from the MGM hotel. Do you remember?
Yes.
The guy took a regular gun, put a bump stock on it, and turned it into like a machine gun. And then he's in a position where he's just shooting down into a crowd of people, and you're completely, it's just this random hail of bullets coming down, and who knows, your wife gets hit and you're okay. One person gets hit, another person doesn't. And internet pornography is like that. It's 24/7, all day, every day, access to horrific content. Estimates now are like about 80% of the internet pornography is violent or humiliation centered, degrading of women. This is just constant. It's not like when I was growing up, it was like, you had to kind of go through the embarrassment of going and buying a Playboy magazine, which was Kool-Aid next to whiskey. It's just the difference is massive. And so that became my thing was really like, how do we educate about the links between pornography and human trafficking? And how do we really start to engage with this huge problem of internet access to pornography by children? We have children now growing up 8, 9, 10 years old that are exposed to pornography, hardcore porn. We're talking, incest porn. We're talking about, orgies, all kinds of abuse that happens. You're taking a 10-year-old boy, and increasingly girls, but you're taking a 10-year-old boy and he's now looking at his mother as a possible sex partner before he's ever even kissed a girl. And it's like the distortion to what sex is, distortion to your own personal identity is just massive through internet pornography. So that became a really serious concern of mine. If you want to ask a question, you just jump in anytime. Because I'll just keep going.
I have a lot of questions for you for sure.
Okay, let me go on to See It Ended, because that was the next, the evolution and moving from Fathercon into See It Ended. So my two conclusions were, fathers are hugely important. They're just massively important in creating a vulnerability in girls and creating a sense of entitlement in boys. So those two things. If you're entitled, then you can demand sex, you can pay for sex, you can rape, whatever it is. And then the vulnerability that enables a girl to be moved by some guy she meets on Instagram. So okay, we got to deal with this issue of fathers. We have to deal with the issue of what happens in the home that's creating, the vulnerability of the exploited and the exploiters. And then the next thing was culture. We live in this kind of stew of culture that's normalizing things that just shouldn't be normal. And we have music and movies and TV shows that are all kind of making a joke of the exploitation and torture of other human beings. And it's just, we have to deal with culture. And so See It Ended was my idea was really, how do we get, not just a screening of one film, not just doing these things that are, going to happen in a church or, be a really targeted group. How do we make a festival? So it's a celebration of ending human trafficking. This is not just kind of get heavied out, see this horrible problem and want to go home and just drink yourself silly so you can forget. It's how do we present ending human trafficking as something that can happen, through film. We're looking at the dark stuff. It's inevitable, but you look at the dark stuff and then you have panel discussions. So after each film, connected to the films and music and dance, we have all the different arts together, paintings, everything brought together into one festival of looking forward to the day we can end human trafficking. And how do we all come together? So the first See It Ended was a physical event in a movie theater here in Los Angeles. There was just an amazing experience of just all of these people coming together. You're bringing together all of these just diverse voices of survivors, of just families, of parents and grandparents, and filmmakers all coming together in one place around this issue of human trafficking. And it was exciting. And we had comments by people who left saying this was fun. And you think of the issue and you think of, if you've seen any human trafficking movies, fun is not something that you would use in the same sentence. But people felt so invigorated by being together with hundreds of other people who cared. They cared about people that they were never going to meet. They cared about someone else's child who was suffering, and it was beautiful. It was just a great experience. We had all set up for our second one, which is going to be in April of 2019 of 2020, and COVID hit, so it canceled everything. It just like slammed into all of our preparations. And so then we started looking at
for this year.
Yeah, so I'll get to that. So what we did, we started to look at how we could go online. If we're not going to have a live event, how do we do it online? So we ended up finding Dave Walsh of Emerge Studios through a musician here in Los Angeles. And so we connected with him. He's up in Canada, and he does virtual reality films. He does a lot of things with support for NGOs, support for like women's empowerment or different issues that he wants to use the kind of tech and media to really elevate the impact of people who are doing really good work. So we connected with him. He got really just so inspired by what we were doing with See It Ended. So then we entered into this kind of a partnership with Emerge Studios and Dave Walsh. And so we put together an event that aired in November. We had like the beta launch, and it's developed into something bigger. We now have a platform for ongoing work with the tech world, with entertainment, with all of the different arts. So we can start to release things weekly, monthly, have all kinds of events to gather together, influencers and people that are working in culture, and start to really give support to filmmakers and artists, to take on this issue. We're now developing a way to work with like USC's film school and different film schools where we wanted this to become part of the curriculum. They make a short film about human trafficking, and we can start to air those to a global audience. So this time we had about 50 speakers. We had 25 films. It was a 6-day event that we launched in November. And that's gonna be relaunched, bigger, organized a little bit differently. Instead of 6 days back to back, we're gonna space it out. But that's gonna be released in the spring. So that's what we're really focused on now, is how to have the most dynamic event that can really bring together artists and musicians, filmmakers, to really start to plant the seed in people's minds that we can end this. If we decide collectively as human beings, there is no reason in the 21st century that we should be having autistic children, that we should be having 15-year-olds getting on planes to fly to other countries thinking that they're going to meet a boyfriend and instead end up being trafficked. It just shouldn't be happening. And so that's the kind of the vision for See It Ended.
I love the vision. As you might already know, that the vision of the show is hope, love, and unity. And we believe that we need to join our forces together. This is a global matter. This is happening, in Africa, in Asia, in the United States, in our backyards, and we all need to join our forces. And the dollar amount of this industry is $150 billion. So for the traffickers, this is a huge business opportunity, and the only way for us to end it is to join our forces together. But I also love that you're bringing the hope for all the people that are in there. And, for a lot of the people who are in there, they might not see the end of the tunnel. So let alone the light at the end of the tunnel. So it is great that you are bringing, I love what you said when the survivor contacted you from Canada, and she was surprised to hear that men cared. And it is wonderful that you're doing this. And it's absolutely true that, you talk about the prevention and the curing the demand side, and that's what I believe as well. We can do as much as at the the upstream and the downstream. So, you know,
Yeah.
and when it comes to the downstream, but there will always be more crimes happening at the upstream. So it will be better if we can, you know, stop it from the very beginning. And that's wonderful what you're doing. So I'm just so excited to hear that, you know, you have I correct me if I were wrong. I think right now it's called the Fathercon and the film festival you said in spring. So do you have a date for our audience yet?
We don't have a date, so we want everyone to pay attention and watch. So it's See It, End It, and so it's really kind of to pay attention on social media and different places. We'll be having more and more messaging coming out. We have a lot of content that will be you know, sharing bit by bit, you know, in these coming months leading up until either May or June probably. Um, And then eventually, I mean, we really want to have, after COVID, we will have just a massive live event and live stream to the world. So that's what we're building towards. So it'll be just a huge gathering of people for, you know, a concert, films, I guess a live event, but then stream it out to the world. And the other thing that I really, you know, there are several things that really get underplayed in the fight against human trafficking. One is prevention. I mean, you hear mention of it a lot, but it's one of the most underfunded areas of really that's actually dealing with the practical side of ending human trafficking. And then the other is labor trafficking and some of these other organ trafficking that don't really get as much support as the sex trafficking. And so through See It, End It, we really want to elevate, you know, the awareness of these different areas. And so one thing that's really important, I think, you have corporations that are selling us products that are made by slave labor. And I realize it's extremely hard for everyone to start to look into. Every time you buy a shirt, you got to check and find out whether it's been made in Bangladesh by slave labor, or every piece of chocolate you eat, has the chocolate been picked by child slaves in Africa? It's so difficult, you know, on a personal level to try to do all of that, you know, checking, you know, source checking of everything you buy. But what we want to do is, if we can start to raise the awareness of labor trafficking, and then get corporations, then we hold corporations accountable. They should be funding the fight against human trafficking. They've got the resources, and you know, labor trafficking is one area where we intersect. Everyone intersects. If you buy clothes, there's a good possibility you're intersecting with something made by slave labor. You know, not everyone is paying for a prostitute or watching pornography, although it's massive. But everyone's buying things, and the supply chain in the production of the products that we buy, we should be cleaning that up. We should not be supporting enslavement of other human beings so that we can have cheap clothing. So as we raise the awareness, and then more and more people start demanding of the stores that they buy from and the companies they buy from, that their supply chain is clean of slave labor, those corporations then can demonstrate their sincerity through supporting things like See It, End It. Like if we have corporate sponsors, we could do just massive awareness campaigns around the world using technology, using media, using the voice of survivors and celebrities and everyone coming together. So it's just such an amazing, you know, possibility and potential that we're sitting on.
Absolutely. I would like you to tell a little bit more about, to educate our viewers, as you mentioned yourself, that, you know, some of them, they never heard about organ trafficking, and some of them might have heard of sex trafficking, but so about labor trafficking, and trying to check the sources, and, you know, the supply chain. How can they find out? Do you have any guidance for them?
I mean, it's not easy, because those things are like everything to do with trafficking. It's hidden, right? It's like it's not. It's that it's hidden in plain sight, is what a lot of people say, right? It's you're sitting right there. You're in Macy's checking shirts, and you have no idea, you know, where they've come from. And they can have the labels changed. Companies have the labels changed to reflect the you know, the retailer, so you don't even know, you know, who's actually making that product. But I think if there's we need more people who actually go. When you go shopping, you ask the store, where do you get your shirts from? Where do you get your clothes from? Where do you get your chocolate from? So people start asking those questions of the retail establishments. And if we have enough people that are actually doing that, that are taking an interest in just saying, I want to make sure that the things that I buy are not, being created with slave labor. So we started a grassroots effort of really starting to look at products, getting on certain mailing lists of different organizations that are working on the labor side, because they usually put out information about, like there were for a while there, Costco was buying, fish that was being caught by slave labor in Southeast Asia. So you have, then there was a campaign that we should not be buying that product. And as that comes to the attention of the store owners, company, business management, things can start to change. Well, they'll stop buying, that product. If it's gonna come back and make their company look bad, they'll start to take more of an interest. So I think that, I really believe we need the top and the bottom. You need to like squeeze from the top and bottom. We need laws that reflect, the intentions of people to not have people living in slavery. So in California, we have a law that if a company is making a certain amount of money, they have to present to the state that they're looking at the supply chain and that there's no slave labor involved. So the more we can have, laws that are driving companies to be more accountable and to be more transparent about where their products come from, who's making it, what are the conditions in the factories that are making this product. We have that kind of a legislative squeeze. And then if we have a more educated consumer, so you start having consumers taking more of an interest in what they're buying. You go home and you Google something, the coffee brands that you buy, you Google their company, find out where their coffee is coming from. And it's much easier to research now, find out if it's coming from a country where there's known slave labor. These are kind of industries that have a problem: coffee, chocolate, a lot of clothing, fishing, where there's a lot of exploitation. We had in the film festival, you see, there's a film called Ghost Fleet, and this is a woman from Thailand, but she goes all over, Southeast Asia, because men are just kind of being grabbed or lured into this fishing industry, and they're not paid. They're worked as slave labor. Children in Ghana that are forced to go into lakes to pull the nets up, that get stuck, and they get caught in the nets and drown. And it's just like this use of human beings in a very disposable way that's really destructive. But I recommend people, start doing some Google searches on supply chain management and the products that they buy. And as we, on our side, we want to make it as easy as possible for people to act. That's the intention of See It Ended. So we'll start to be posting, petition campaigns. We recently had, like the campaign against Pornhub, and now there's a campaign. Facebook has a way that they're making it really easy for people to access pornography. So we want to raise the awareness of those things through our platform, so people that can know if there's a petition to sign, if there's legislation that's being proposed in their state, that they can just sign something, go online, look at campaigns that are being run, where there's effort that they can make. If there's anything being boycotted because there's slave labor involved, we want to start posting that through See It Ended. So this is really like Dave and I, we really want to make this as easy as possible for people to act, because once you learn about something, if you don't act, it just becomes something that is a burden. It makes you feel guilty. But once you act, then you're in. You've bought in on the idea that we can actually end this, and that's so important. So once you learn something, when you see a movie that you have, something that you can do. When we had the See It Ended in the theater, we had organizations out in the lobby. And so people would watch the movie, they'd hear the panel discussion, they'd walk out, they'd walk up to a table and go, "What can I do? What do you need?" And it was so cool, because it was just, no delay. It was no going home and thinking about it. It was, you walked right out, that's something I can do. I can donate money. I can volunteer this. I can provide backpacks, you know, whatever it is. And very, very important.
That's wonderful. Your conversation is so like is packed with so much meat. Like I'm taking notes literally here, so I don't interrupt you with every other sentence. But I love that when you said like people taking actions, because like we mentioned earlier, that you are calling people to join the force, and I'm calling people to unite and work on this and fight together. I really believe in people taking the actions, and all the NGOs are working together. It's not a competition, because each NGO has its own specialty, and we are only for fighting this together. So now, in a little bit of my background, I work. I still am a business consultant. That's my daytime job. So I provide advice to law enforcement, to private sectors in terms of international trade. So a little bit about that information is that, when you mentioned about labor trafficking and things being manufactured, you talk about the shirt and the label being exchanged. Just to share a little bit of the information to our audience, if they don't already know, you probably already know that the law by the US, what it says is, let's say, I have this, this towel here. And so if the fabric is made in another country, however, it is assembled in the US, technically you can put a label said that's made in the US. That
Exactly.
is very tricky, because you pay maybe, I'm just using example, say $1 if it came from China, but you might pay $10 if it came from the US. So I totally agree with Patrick that do your due diligence, go Google it, go Google that brand, where their supply chain. You have to be knowledgeable, and I love what you say as well, that the consumers are the ones who need to take the action. I want to add something is like, for the corporations, whether it's Costco, Macy's, whatever company that is, when people stop buying from them and they start hurting, that they'll do the research, and then they'll find the source, say, okay, this is what's happening, and that's the way to grab their attention. So I really like what you're calling, everyone talking about taking the action. Also, I made a note about the Facebook campaign, and the campaign against the Facebook pornography, and which also the Pornhub that ended. Where can our viewers find it so that they can sign the petition as well?
That I just heard about the Facebook one this afternoon. What I can do is I'll email you that information, so you can let
Absolutely, and we
your
can
viewers
put
know.
it
But
in
there's a
the
petition right now.
content section. Yes, we can link that in the content section below, so that our viewers can go on. And this, if you can donate, that's great. But if you cannot, this is the least action that you can take, and we need to join our forces. That is wonderful. And so you mentioned about Fathercon. You mentioned about CNN ended, and for people to monitor your social media. Tell us, our viewers, about where to find you, and we'll put in the content section below as well. This way they can find you.
I can give you my email address is really good to reach me here. So it's patrick@seeitended.org. Oops, let me move that over. So seeitended.org, and that's also the website. So I would, if you like seeitended.org, so you can get like regular updates. Also the Twitch TV, it's twitch.tv/seeitended is where we have like also our podcast, and we introduce filmmakers. We introduce people that are really active in this space. So same as you. I mean, we probably could exchange. Exchange the people that we
technically, I guess I am an artist, because I'm a dancer and I do act a little bit. So
we had this great performance. Susan Silvestri, she has a group called Women of Wonder, and she's done these just beautiful dances related to human trafficking. Very just powerful and moving. And this is what we want. So it's really, everyone, you know, everyone's got a part to play. And I think every kind of artistic expression is so critical, because art has a way of touching our hearts, like beyond intellect. It goes to the heart. And that's what really, when people have their hearts moved, then they really want to act. You want to kind of bring your intellect and bring your action together around what you're feeling. And I think we need all of those. We need intellectual stimulation, we need emotional stimulation, and then we need, you know, the ease of action. We need to give people steps that they can take. So I really encourage everyone, like, please go to seeitendit.org, and you'll get an introduction to what we've put together. We have a great little kind of video there that shows you a little bit of what we're putting together and how we can work. We really want corporations, we want companies to really step up, to really, you know, I think increasingly, you know, the kind of the millennial Generation Z, they want to shop from businesses that are doing something good for the world. You know, that's their buying power is really linked now to what they see as a benefit, not just a product for themselves personally, but really for others. So we really want to get more corporations to say, yeah, human trafficking is something that people care about. And so we need to care about it. So we're going to put our resources to where they're going to have the greatest amount of good, which I hope many of them choose See It End It, because I think we have this amazing platform. And our thing, I mean, one thing that you said, it's like, it's a global problem, but it's also local. And it's like this community has human trafficking happening in their small town in South Dakota, or, you know, in their you know, suburb of Atlanta. So we need to take the issue, you know, like really have a local focus, but bring that out to the global community, so that, you know, we have here in Los Angeles, we have Saving Innocence, which it was founded by Kim Biddle, and they were the first, you know, advocacy organization to work with LA County, the Sheriff's Department, and work, you know, as the kind of first responders for any human trafficking case of minors. There are other organizations that work with people over 18, but this was the first group that specifically worked with minor children. Their youngest, I might add, was 8. But then they respond. They'll go with the police on raids if they're going to raid someplace. So they're there. They know how to speak to the survivor, to the victim. They know what they're going to need, how to take care of them, and then they stay with them. Their advocates stay with them. They're attentive with them. They make sure that their needs are met. If they're taken to jail, they're going to visit them, make sure that they're going to have the access to legal representation, whatever they need. Amazing organization, just what they've done. And so you know, what we want is we highlight these different organizations. We'll highlight Saving Innocence or Russ Tuttle in Missouri with Stop Trafficking Project. We have these different individuals, different organizations that are awesome. Like what they're accomplishing, you know, on a local level is just so powerful. So why not tell their stories? So somebody in Kenya or somebody in Mumbai can say, wow, I can do that here. So we start exchanging and learning from each other and inspiring each other on a whole nother level. It's just, you know, the potential then is to have these global efforts expanded to having I mean, a local effort having global impact. And that's what, you know, that's what can be accomplished today through this merging of technology and media, you know, and kind of the corporate world. It's just so much is there to happen.
Well said. Local effort, global impact. I really, you know, I like what you're thinking. I wanted to mention about, you know, utilizing the film and art festival to kind of touch people's soul on a different level. Myself, as I mentioned, I'm a dancer. So when I dance, I feel like I'm in a different world. It's just there are expressions that you cannot express. You know, some people are writers, and I hope that someday I'll have time, find time to write. But, you know, I feel like when I dance, that's the way that I can express. Therefore, people connect with each other in different ways. So I think it's wonderful that you're utilizing this with, you know, through the film, through the art. That's why people came to you say, wow, that was a nice event, because they really actually got out of it. I work with people, they're successful businessmen, they're attorneys from oil and gas companies, and you've lived in Houston, Texas. It's the center of the world for oil and gas. And when you talk to them, just like, okay, we're gonna have dinner, good friends having dinner, talk about it, they're like, what's this about? And why, I mean, just honestly, that's the response. It's like, why should I care? It has nothing to do with me. Even if you tell them, this is happening to them, it just so happened that luckily so far, nothing happened to his family, but he's a dancer. So when you relate to them through dance, they were like, okay, somehow just, I guess there's different nerves in the brain that kind of cracks. So I really love what you do, like, utilizing that through art. And like I said, you have so much meat packed in this conversation. I've been making notes all over the place. I wanted to ask you, what are the message you would like to deliver to our audience who are father, who are men, who are, young men, maybe they're not a father yet. What would you like to tell them so that they can prevent this from happening, whether to their children, to themselves, or to their loved ones?
Well, I think, as a man, so my concern, with human trafficking, it's automatic to empathize and to feel something for the victims, right? But we so often demonize the men, and this is, and rightly so, in many cases. I mean, there are some just absolutely hideous human beings that are willing to do anything and inflict any kind of harm on someone who's vulnerable, and that's not what I'm talking about now. There are a lot of men who just buy the lie, and we've created this normalization, and we've created an environment where we end up doing things that are actually really self-harming. You consider, how many divorces are happening now in this country. I mean, I've heard like up to like 58% of the divorces are now linked to pornography, and pornography. Men think that if I just click, if I'm just watching, I'm not having anything to do with exploitation. This is like, it's victimless. All I'm doing is watching content that's already made. Nobody's getting hurt. I'm not doing anything except in the privacy of my own home, enjoying the entertainment of someone else having things done to them. But that's just not true. When you look at every single keystroke, every single keyword, every single search that you do, everything that you linger on and look at is all going into the data that's collected by porn companies. And you look at what's happened recently with Pornhub, where they've had to throw away 10 million videos out of their inventory because they're dangerous. They're either inspiring incest, which is the number one sought after pornography of the millennial generation. Anything related to incest relationships, brother and sister, father, daughter, mother, son. And this is a massive now part of the porn industry. But you're contributing, every time you click on something, that's contributing to requiring a trafficked human being to perform. Women do not sign up. The number of women who are going to sign up to be abused and ridiculed, and the things that are done in pornography today is not that big. And so you have to have a victim who can't say no. So you have performers. A lot of the survivors I've talked with, were filmed, and their exploitation is out there for people to make use of. And that's just tragic. So I really, my message to a lot of fathers who have been derailed by things like pornography and by this normalization of purchasing of sex, they're intersecting with victims. They're intersecting with someone who's being forced into this, whether they smile or not. I mean, you see this. So anybody who's looked at this issue, and you see how, you have a young girl who's being forced to smile, to look appealing, to look like she's enjoying herself, when her heart is breaking and she's having to take drugs and drink just to numb herself because of the experience she's going through. So for men to realize that I think there's an awful lot of men who are in that middle category, you know, where they're not evil people. They're not mean-spirited. They're not someone who wants to exploit or wants to be part of the torture and abuse of another human being. But pornography is normalizing this stuff, and their brains, if you know, I could go on for another hour on just what happens in the brain neurologically, what happens, you know, through watching porn, and the process of changing your appetite, changing like what you tolerate and what you desire, is, you know, the manipulation of the porn industry. But anyway, it's a huge problem, and it's my word to young men who are going to become fathers: don't jeopardize one of the greatest blessings you can have in your life. I mean, having a daughter who says, I want to marry someone like you because you are such an incredible role model. You are such an incredible strength in my life. You make me feel safe. You make me feel valuable. You make me feel like the most precious person in the world. You know, that comes from the father. There's an interesting thing that happens with the difference between a mother and a father. The mother is so embracing, so supportive of a child's upbringing, that it's kind of like the air you breathe. The love of a mother is really kind of atmospheric. A father's love tells you that you're really worthy of being loved, right? If you get that, if you let that sink in, it's like when the father loves the child, it says, you're worth my time. You're worth something. You, as an individual, as a human being, you are worth my engaging with and caring about and loving and supporting and protecting. And that's irreplaceable. And that's why when it's missing, you'll have a young girl who wants it so badly. She wants an engagement with a healthy, with a male figure that makes her feel those things, that then she ends up being exploited. So if you're a young guy who's not married yet, or married but not having children yet, really look forward to being a father. Look forward to that as a beautiful part of your life, but also, you know, that there are going to be temptations. We live in a toxic environment where there's constant temptation to be distracted from the things that are really important in life, and it causes generational irreparable harm. So do not let yourself get sidetracked. Really prepare yourself for one of the greatest blessings, but it's also fragile. So you need to really kind of, you know, strengthen yourself and resolve yourself clearly for what's ahead. I was so moved. I read about this one kid. I think he was in high school, and he had an empty picture frame next to his bed. And someone asked him, why do you have an empty picture frame? And he goes, that's where my wife's picture is going to go. My wife in the future. So he's has this forward thinking of, you know, I'm going to keep myself, you know, like ready to really love this person for the rest of my life. I'm not going to, you know, treat my love carelessly, but I'm really going to look forward to something in the future. And I was really touched by that. Wish I'd been that guy. You know, but I think, you know, the role of fathers is very important. And if you've been a good father, you've been a successful father, realize that there are, you know, we have 400,000 people in the foster care system. 430,000 kids are in the foster care system in America. You know, think about being a mentor. Think about being someone who can use your generosity of spirit and your heart to really make sure that another child doesn't get knocked into a ditch, you know, in life. There's nothing as rewarding, I think, as being that kind of role model, that kind of father to your children, having your children's love. There's just nothing like it. And we sacrifice it. We lose it for 20 minutes in the back of a car. We jeopardize some of the greatest things that we'll experience in life, you know, by allowing ourselves to become addicted to a lie. It's never going to give you, it's always going to overpromise and underdeliver. You know, the whole sex industry, they're banking on you believing in a lie, and they're taking that to the bank, and at your expense. Right? You know, as men, it's your expense. You're going to lose your wife. You can lose your job. You can lose so much, you know, through this industry.
Well said. You know, I came from a different cultural background, and I often tell people, like, I had a friend, once we had dinner together, and we were sitting across, you know, the two ends of the table, he and I hardly talk. He would just text me. I'm like, I'm here. Why don't you talk to me? I'm describing this in a mentality, especially in the digital age. Like people cannot like live without their phone. But this phone is like, it depends on what you use it for. It can do so much harm. And it's so essential, so important to have a good role model to teach their kids. Whether I totally agree. Again, coming from my upbringing, we think that dinner time is the most precious time of the day with the family. This is the day that you connect with the family, whether parents, whether your husbands or your wife and your children. And this is the time that you communicate and bond together. But nowadays I know that people have their different schedules, and they have different hobbies, and some people just take the meal in front of their computer, whether they watch a podcast, watch porn maybe, or play video games. But I really strongly encourage that during this COVID, there are bad things, but there's also good things, that while
Yeah.
we are together, why don't we use this time to bond? And I think it's really important. And I'm like, I was brought up in a very traditional upbringing, so I feel like yes, father and mother. And to share a little bit, like in China, if a child is born without a father, and I'm not kidding you, you will not be able to, at least when I was still there, you will not be able to get the equivalent of the social security number, because the government simply do not recognize that child is legal. I mean, the child is innocent, but it
Right.
teaches the lesson of the parents to not be irresponsible. Like, obviously people are going to have divorce, but they have to think more seriously. Don't take it just like, yeah, I don't care, we get together today and then tomorrow, who cares, get a divorce and he's going to pay alimony, and as long as he pays for the alimony. But no, like you said, the father figure, the role model. I like listening to a lot of podcasts, like self-help and the informative, like these sessions. And I forgot which one, probably Marissa Pierce, one of my favorite mentors. And before I forget, I want to mention that Marissa Peer has been very supportive, and she's sponsoring a free ebook, I Am Enough. And that's very helpful for all those listening, whether you're a victim, survivor, and or you're a social worker. By reading this, you'll be able to help the other people. And we'll put in the link below how you can register to get the access code. But what I wanted to mention, Marissa Peer, is I believe it was her podcast. She said, the mother, like you mentioned, mother plays this role and father plays that role. Her version is, I believe that, the mother is gonna be like the nurturing part, say, okay, I'm always gonna be loving you, and just be yourself. And the father is gonna say, okay, go out there and be adventurous, and do whatever you are going to do that goes in reference with like business, school, and everything. But the important part is, I'm gonna get your back. So the father figure is equally important to the boy as well as the girl. And so
Exactly.
the girl, just like you said, so the girl is not gonna say, okay, I'm missing that father. So a lot of the young girls especially, they tend to date someone more mature, because they were lacking that father figure in their life. So I just wanted to point out that is very well said. And I love, love what your organization does, and what love organizations, all the initiatives that you're doing. And you talked about the neural responses when a person listens to the pornography. I would definitely love to bring you on board, and do another show, just like a whole show, to educate our viewers about their responses. Because this pornography, like for instance myself, I know I speak English, I have an accent, but my vocabulary seriously did not include, like when I was in school, did not teach us what incest is, what orgy is. I literally, I mean, these are very graphic, but I didn't know. And when you Google it, the pictures are gonna come up. And
just
I
come up.
was like,
Right.
I had my mouth wide open. But this is like what people are facing. So, we would definitely love you to bring you back to educate more to our audience. I know that you have a lot of messages that you have sent to the parents, the fathers, the men, the young men, and the corporation. So like in conclusion, like what message would you like for our audience to listen to as a takeaway?
Well, I think the number one thing is just that, I mean, collectively we can end this. The 21st century is really the time that when we should really see the end of slavery. And we each of us have power. I think for so many, they see this huge problem, and then they don't feel like they can really do anything. Like, what can I, as this one little person, do? And I'm just like, looking at you and myself. I mean, I'm an English teacher. I teach English as a second language. I mean, that's my day job. But I've done all of these other things because I couldn't just turn away. And I think that there's something that everyone can do. And so to really search your heart and see, like, do you really want to live in a world where we have, 8-year-olds deciding who they are and the future of their life by looking at pornography? Do we want to live in a world where we have children that are disposable, that are being used by certain industries for slave labor? Do we want to live in a world where our daughters every day are vulnerable? If they chat with someone on Instagram or Snapchat, if they're making relationships with someone, they're putting themselves in a vulnerable position. They think that they're just making relationships and having fun. We all have a part to play in deciding the world that we want to live in, and find your place. If it's donating, if it's volunteering, if it's bring a speaker to your church group or to your school. Everyone's got connections that they can bring to this to this fight, and we're all going to be much happier human beings when we don't have to be constantly looking over our shoulder and fearing for what our children are going to face and go through. So I mean, that's my number one message is everyone's got a part to play, and just find yours, find your niche, find where you can make a valuable contribution to making the kind of world we all want to live in.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you so much, Patrick. I really appreciate your time. I know that we were trying to schedule our time. You had to squeeze in, after your daytime job, and you probably haven't had dinner yet. But I'm really inspired by what you do, and thank you again. And for those who are tuning in later on, this is the Miss Texas Show. If you find this information helpful, please like it, subscribe, and most importantly, share. Sharing is caring, and share that with the people so that we can bring more awareness. And just like Patrick said, find your niche and do your share. If you cannot donate, then volunteer and bring a speaker to your church, to your school. But thank you again, Patrick. I really appreciate it. Like I said, we're going to bring you on again in the near future to talk about the neural effect by watching the pornography.
Great. Thank you so much. I love what you're doing. And we all have our part, and you found a great one.
Thank you. Like you said, if we all do a little bit of our share and find what we're good at doing, the world will be a better place.
Absolutely.
Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you so much,
Patrick.
everyone.